welcome to the We Talk Health podcast, the official podcast for West Tennessee Healthcare. Please be advised that this podcast is not intended to replace any medical advice. Always follow your medical professional's advice and direction. Nothing said in this podcast is intended to supersede or supplement the direction of your medical caretakers. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at wetalkhealthpodcast@gmail.com, and we will do our best to answer any questions you may have.
Welcome to another episode of We Talk Health. My name is Will Kwasigroh, and joining me in the studio today is Ms. Kelly Nye and Mr. Jim Nelson. They are both employed through the Therapy and Learning Center, which is part of West Tennessee Healthcare. Kelly and Jim, how's it going? How are y'all?
Great.
Going well, thank you.
Good. Thanks for coming in today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what to look for in your child's development. And we'll kind of define what that means here in just a minute. But I'd like to get to know you guys better first before we do that. So Kelly, tell me about yourself.
Born and raised in Jackson, went to physical therapy school and graduated in 1998, employed at West Tennessee Healthcare since 96 and started full-time in October of 99.
Awesome. So you went to physical therapy school, making you a physical therapist.
That's correct.
So Jim, what about you?
I'm Jim Nelson. I'm an OT with the Therapy and Learning Center. I am married to also another outstanding occupational therapist. Well, I'm a father of three, and I also went to UT Memphis. Kelly and I actually were in some classes together at UT. And I've been working with the Therapy and Learning Center through the hospital since 1998.
You guys have been around for a while doing this thing. That's amazing. So like I said, we're going to talk about what to look for in childhood development. So before we do that, can you guys kind of explain what pediatric OT and PT is? People typically think about, I need to go to PT because I was in a car wreck and I have to fix my arm, or I slipped going into the swimming pool and I broke my leg and now I have to have physical therapy or occupational therapy. But a lot of people, I don't think, realize that that is also something that children can benefit from as well. So can you kind of explain what the difference in those two things are specifically for childhood development?
Sure. So pediatric physical therapy is something that you would pursue if your child was not developing based on guidelines that you have been given from your physician after you've had a child, or if there is something that your child was born with, that they had some type of disability that they needed assistance in achieving what we would consider normal developmental milestones. So those are the types of things that pediatric physical therapists look at and work with.
And on the same token, for pediatric occupational therapy and beyond, we work from birth through toddler, grade school, teenage, adults with disabilities, and forward. In conjunction with PT and speech, have one of the greatest jobs that you can have because we play with our children, okay?
Okay.
To where we get to see where they're at currently and help move them forward. And that may be through a variety of diagnoses that they come in with. It may be a developmental delay, prematurity, autism, cerebral palsy, a variety of diagnoses. But then we take them from where they're at and help them move them forward in their occupation. If that's going to be play, if that's going to be help them in school, adulthood, just to move them to that next step, depending on what they need. And also those caregivers, those families, helping to educate them and help move them forward too. So fortunately, we have a variety of services to help do that through our center, from the NICU all the way up to the adults.
I'll plug my uncle here for a second. He brags on you guys. My uncle is Ron Kwasigroh. He's the director of the Therapy and Learning Center. And I really do believe that you guys are some of the best people out there working for West Tennessee Healthcare. He brags about you guys every time I see him. So thank you for what you're doing. You guys are doing a great job. One of the questions I had was, what do you believe are areas physically and occupationally that parents maybe misconstrue as their child's quirks or simply behaviors that they will grow out of, but in reality they need to be evaluated by a medical professional?
Well, I would say in the world of physical development and physical therapy, the biggest thing would be to those pamphlets that your doctor gives you on developmental milestones from birth until the age of about 2 or 3. Those are true things that you should look at. And if your child has missed something, then that would be something that I would certainly take to my physician. They can help you decide if that's an important thing that your child may or may not be ready for, but we can take a look at that and see, is this something that we think they're going to achieve without help, or are we far enough along that this is something we may need to help them achieve? Especially, I would say, if you've made it through all of those milestones and then you're getting ready for school, it would be important that you look at the people around your kids, their peers, if you are in a church setting or out at the park, or if there are things that you look around and you think my child may or may not be doing those things, then maybe that's something you would bring up with your physician, and then we can always, evaluations are great. We can take a look at your child, use tools that we have at our disposal to determine whether this is something that warrants us seeing your child, or whether this is something we feel like that we just need to give you some things to work on at home.
Okay. So a minute ago you mentioned certain milestones that children meet as they start to age. What would be some of those milestones?
So, for example, crawling is one that's kind of moving up the timeline a little bit, but crawling would be something that happens around the 6 to 9 month mark. Walking is anywhere from 12 to 16 months. Is considered normal. That doesn't mean that your child won't walk if they haven't achieved that, but sometimes they need a little bit more help, or there might be something that's keeping them from doing that. To go backwards, rolling would be 4 months. Sitting up would be in that 6 month range, but every child has their own set of timelines, but those are guidelines.
And to piggyback on that, starting from birth, then in occupational therapy, we'll also look at tasks such as tracking, eye tracking, building from there as far as just reaching for toys, being able to grasp with both hands.
Okay.
Being able to bring toys to midline. Looking forward, we work hand in hand with PT as well on those gross motor skills as far as rolling, pushing up on forearms, making sure that we can get that head up against gravity, work on all those muscles, and then finally progress to sitting as well. And that's where then you can truly get that free upper extremity use, being able to reach, play for toys, grab toys, bang, and those play skills.
Okay.
Once your child is walking, there are a few things that I would say as a physical therapist that I would notice if I took my own children to the park and I was watching children. It is very typical that you can see children run around on their toes a lot. If your child is someone that does stay up on their tiptoes a lot, that is not considered normal development, and I would definitely be taking my child to a physician to talk to them about that, and then at that point they can help determine whether this is something that my child can come down on their heels, or whether this is something that they don't ever come down on their heels. If they don't ever come down on their heels, you can imagine that this would cause long-term issues, because that's not a normal way to ambulate. Your body is not designed to stay up on your toes. So we would certainly want to see a child that stays up on their toes all the time in physical therapy.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Is that sort of issue fairly common?
So tiptoe walking is very common. There are lots of things that can cause that to happen, some of which is a sensory issue, meaning that your child may have something that causes them to not want to put their feet down. So therefore they just stay up on their toes because it's not comfortable to them, but they may not be able to put that into words or even tell you that that's the reason. Sometimes it's because there's something anatomically wrong, meaning that maybe they have a very short Achilles tendon or a tightness in a muscle group that keeps them from coming down on their heels. It may just be that they like that feeling, and so they stay up there, and then other issues happen because they stayed up there. So there's really a lot of things that could be causing that, which is the reason why we would want to see your child.
Gotcha. What are some other issues that kids could be having in addition to toe walking?
So we see kids that even have trouble standing on one leg and navigating stairs, so that they would have some balance issues that could be related to hearing. you have a vestibular system, which helps you keep your balance. Well, it may be that there's something going on. Maybe even they just have chronic ear infections or something that have caused them to lose their balance, and so they're falling and they don't know, again, they can't tell you the reason why. If you notice your child falling a lot, we do see kids that their parents are wondering why they always fall down, whether that's just because they are a boy and just love to run and jump over things and fall down because it's fun, or whether they're seeking input in their body because it doesn't feel normal to them to not be falling down. Some other things that we see with kids that are up and moving, so sometimes in that 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old range, even up into high school, is that you find that your child is a very heavy walker. You can hear them coming through the house and it sounds like a herd of elephants, but it's not, it's just your child. Some kids are just naturally heavy-footed, and there's not anything wrong with anything that they're doing. However, sometimes it is them seeking, again, some sensory input, where the heavier they walk, the more feedback that they give their body through their nervous system, which allows them to know where their body is in space. So if, it could be something and it could be nothing. And it also could be that if you hear your child's foot slapping, sometimes that's an inherent muscle weakness in muscles that are supposed to help you control that. That, again, could be a sign of an underlying disability, or it could just be a muscle weakness because they've also maybe didn't have shoes that were supportive and that muscle developed normally. A lot of childhood disabilities or things that you notice could end up being nothing, but it could also be something, and we would obviously rather see your child and tell you that it's nothing and have them in the system in the sense that we can help you determine what is considered something that can be easily handled, or whether we need intervention to help you.
So, Jim, what about like early elementary school age?
While we're talking about development as well, one of the key areas is also play skills and understanding how they develop in your child. First, you're going to have that manipulative phase, that infant phase from birth through around a year old.
Okay.
Where you more mouth, bang, throw toys. It's fun. It's cute. And then around that 1 year to 18 month or so mark, you're going to have, up to age 2, you're going to have more functional toy play emerge. And that's going to be around that first birthday where your child will start maybe handing you items. Start using toys more appropriately, that functional or relational toy play. Using, like I said, toys on purpose, putting things in, handing you things. A lot of repetition is what that play looks like. After that, you move from that functional or relational play to more schematic play. Okay. And that's going to be beginning to run a car, play with a doll, use a comb. And there are even types of subtypes of that schematic play, but that's what that more looks like, that continuum of play. Okay. So if you miss any parts of those, or you appear to be more stuck in one of those areas for longer than you would think, or your peers are, your friends, that too that's an area of a red flag. That's a concern to reach out to your pediatrician, reach out to others, and make sure that your instincts, are correct, because oftentimes they are. Okay. It's also important too to make sure that obviously you are your child's best advocate. Mm-hmm. So when you have these concerns, because oftentimes when you go to the pediatrician, you're not able to spend 20 minutes with them like you would maybe with a PT or OT and evaluation, and you'll spend actually more time than that. But you're not going to have as much time for the pediatrician to pick up on that. Right. So if you're the advocate and you're able to say, hey, I have these concerns. Can you explain this to me? Or these are my concerns. What can we, is there something that we can do about this?
So you as the parent would be seeing your child make these quote unquote mistakes more than what the
challenges and maybe some delays in development that others may be doing in your peer group, and just make sure that you are the advocate and can point those out and say, hey, I really have a concern about this. I thought we would have attained this goal by now, but it's been 6 months and we're still not doing X, Y, Z. This is really a concern of mine, and how can we move forward?
Gotcha. Tell me about outside activities.
Something that I see as a physical therapist in the school setting is that when children get to kindergarten, they have not always been introduced to what I would consider things that your PE teacher is going to introduce your child to in a PE and or recess setting. Sometimes these children end up being referred for physical therapy because they have not been given an opportunity to play outside. I would like to strongly encourage parents to take your child to the playground. That type of climbing and the slide and learning how to swing on your own doesn't happen if your child has never seen a swing before. Some of the other things that I have noticed is that children have not been exposed to balls, tennis balls, basketballs, a playground ball. You can use one size ball for a variety of things: kick, dribble, catch, throw. But if your child has never seen a ball and spends most of their time indoors, not outside, then when they get to kindergarten in a school setting, sometimes their PE teacher and or their classroom teacher may have concerns that they have, and most of the time when I see this, it's not because they can't dribble or can't catch and throw, it's because they have not been given the opportunity to develop that skill. The other thing that I see is, in addition to ball skills, is things like running, galloping, skipping. Again, you can do things like this at home by standing on one foot. And skipping is not a hard skill, and most kids develop it just without you even teaching them. But again, being outside, doing a game like a hopscotch or chase or duck, duck, goose, things like that that you and I may have done when we were kids. If you're not in a group setting, or maybe you don't have a large peer group for your child, then you as a parent can play that game. Red light, green light, mother may I, things like that where you would be playing with your child are extremely beneficial in getting ready for school, not only for following directions and being in part of a group setting, but also those types of activities that you think, if you haven't ever seen them, they don't happen.
And that's a good segue also to talk about screen time, because I'm borrowing this line from something that I had read recently, that children need a dose of boredom at times to teach how to cope with frustration and control impulses. Because if you're constantly being stimulated by screens, then they may forget or not even know. A lot of our children don't even know how to rely on themselves to entertain themselves. And then that can lead to a lot of frustration and limit their imagination and motivation to seek those skills that Kelly was talking about prior, if you always have something bright and flashing that's coming up next. And with that, with screen time, there's a lot of information out there. There is a consensus, though, from different sources that screen time, especially for babies up through age 2, is not recommended.
Okay.
Now, in this day and age, video chatting with family members, grandparents, that type of thing, yes. I mean, we're going to do that.
Of course.
But just giving the child, your child, infant, what have you, unfettered access to a screen is not what we need to do by any means. And then later on, from ages around 2 to 4, and it's sad that we have to have these ages and ranges for screen time.
Sure.
But it's out there and we need it. So for that guidance, or no more than an hour for those ages 2 to 4, and folks can look up, ranges after that. But that's really important, because that screen time does affect our children in a large way. I'm sure Kelly sees this in school too. We talked about being less creative in play. It's going to reduce empathy for others too, because children don't learn that empathy, those cues, from learning on a screen. They learn it when they're playing games with you, one-on-one, those visual cues that they find and they see with real human emotions and relations that they don't get from the screen. And that's going to cause, like we talked about earlier, having frustration with not being able to control your impulses and that, behavioral concerns. We see a lot of that too, trying to help parents, pinpoint why that is and help them walk through that. Decreased attention. And then also, it'll affect sleep patterns as well. If your brain's not wired like that to be on that heightened sense X number of hours a day, and then all of a sudden, okay, let's turn off that tablet, let's turn off that screen. It's time for bed right now. And it's no wonder that our children are having challenges with winding down, going to sleep when there's maybe not a consistent bedtime routine. So that's a important part to think about. So what we can do, follow those recommendations. Don't give, our children those screens, especially so young. Cut out, eliminate even the background noise, that background TV that sometimes is just on. We don't think about it, but And we'll talk about sensory processing in a little bit later. But just having all that constant noise behind us does impact our brain and our thinking and even our sleep-wake cycle. And just keeping phones out of our kids' hands too young. And, of course, I'll get on a soapbox like TVs in bedrooms, that type of thing too. Just being mindful, just being the parent and making those hard choices that we're going to help our children move forward later on.
Absolutely.
Kindergarten teacher will thank you because they're not watching television 7 hours a day. They're expected to come in and sit at a little table and engage in activities that are not related to a screen. And I can promise you that we have lots of children that are not willing to participate because they want to watch television. And that doesn't help them in any area.
And that gets us into childhood obesity too, because if what we're doing primarily is on our screens, and I'm guilty, I'll do it, I'll eat XYZ while I'm watching the show or something.
Oh, sure.
I mean, our children are doing that too. So I need to be a good example and make sure that all of us are for our children too.
It's like a monkey see, monkey do situation.
In the last 19 years, I have had at least 10 or more children referred to physical therapy, and it's not because they are behind for any genetic or developmental reason. It is legitimately because they are obese and they are unable to perform activities that a typical kid would because they are too heavy to be able to, let's say, jump up in the air because they cannot lift their own body weight up off the ground or stand up from the floor.
Yeah.
And they're in a school setting, and that breaks my heart.
I've heard the term sensory processing. Can you not necessarily give me a definition, but can you give me a layman's term, I guess, definition of what that might be? With
sensory processing, again, it's a wide range of abilities that our children do. It's taking in that input from the external world, bringing it in and internalizing that, processing, and then being able to cope.
Okay,
being able to do something with that. So, for instance, babies, you can be either over or under responsive. Again, there's a wide range. And you're going to have a wide range with typically developing children. And the challenge occurs when you have one or two indicators or more of dysfunction at various times. And again, you may have this in typical kids, especially if you're overtired or overstimulated. But when those symptoms are persistent and affect your relations, the child's relationships, well-being, and general functioning compared with your other peers in the same age peers, and that's when you're concerned. Now, some of these symptoms may look like challenges with calming as an infant. Your child may cry much more so than others. Even if you're trying to swaddle them, cuddle them, maybe they don't want to be cuddled at all. Maybe they just want to be left alone. So that would be an example of under-responsive. I've had some kiddos who come in, that I've seen later on in life or around 1 year, they'll say, so-and-so was just such a good baby. I would just put him in the crib, he wouldn't fuss or do anything. Well, then that's a red flag too for me, because I think, was he under-responsive? Then sometimes they'll say, we had trouble feeding, and that's when you kind of, we pull in speech too. Had trouble feeding. Maybe that child is kind of a lower muscle tone, had trouble feeding, using a bottle, nursing, that type of thing. And those are some of those sensory signs that maybe we could have caught a little bit earlier and helped. And then on the flip side, you could be overstimulated to where, and you don't tolerate or process that information as well. Maybe you don't like to be, as messy. Maybe if you're under-responsive, may not notice when you're around a year old. Sometimes I like to ask that question a lot when I'm seeing a new kiddo who's maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, 3 years old, and I'm talking with that family. I'll say, all right, tell me about that first birthday. What did that look like? What do they do with their birthday cake? And it's a great one. Everybody remembers that.
The smash cake, maybe.
No, they'll say, no, we had that cake and they did not want any part of that. So that's when I'm thinking, and then I can start to ask some more questions, or they'll say, I don't think they really even noticed, or something like that, or they wouldn't eat it at all, or they just, on the flip side, conversely, they demolished it, they ate it, and they did fine, and I say maybe that's not a concern at all.
Gotcha.
So with that, then when you look up at more toddlers, when you're talking about sensory processing, and again, it's a wide variety, but in our toddlers, sometimes, Kelly was talking about it earlier, being able to recognize, kind of our muscles and where our feet are. Same thing with our hands. That motor planning part is kind of a big word, but just that motor coordination. If we have some of that, maybe impaired or challenges with our sensory processing, we may not be able to pick up our cup as well. It may be extra messy in doing that. Everybody has somebody in their family. I do. It's probably me that just kind of spilt them. Okay.
Yeah. Same.
And again, sometimes one or two things a little bit quirky that we do, that's fine. That's just how Jim is. But if you have several of these that link together that impact your daily functioning, that's when you have a concern. And we look at those sensory skills even more, especially maybe and you'll have some characteristic things you may see like hand flapping, some excessive maybe vocalizations or humming, that type of thing too. It's not necessarily indicative of a larger problem, but I would definitely look at that and kind of think about, okay, what else do we have that we do that we didn't even know about? And when I start talking with our families and interviewing them, I also realize parents oftentimes are just so great. They love their kids. They don't sometimes realize what all they're doing for their kids to make that child's day go perfectly. So that way there's not a meltdown. So that way they can go through their day and take a nap and get their other children together or go to Walmart, go to Kroger, what have you, because they just don't present that opportunity for little Johnny to wear shoes. They just go ahead and just let them not wear shoes. And again, sometimes that's fine, but coupled with all these other things, that's when there's a problem. If you have to have a certain type of sock, you have to only eat from the red Lightning McQueen cup with a certain with a certain spout. We laugh a little bit, but that is reality. And some people have to buy multiple of those cups, fill in the blank, whatever that is, so that way they can eat. And then they're still using that cup when they go to kindergarten. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that, Kelly, which is then a big concern. And that's talking about that sensory processing and why you would come to OT and get that referral.
Yeah. Kelly, what are some activities that you would suggest for kids to do outside of school to make them more successful students, socially, physically, mentally, or emotionally?
I'm a mom of 4, and I think that being involved in something outside your home is important. If you're not a sports person, then go to the park and play with your child and have peers there. It doesn't have to cost money to be appropriate, but coming home from school, sitting in your home until you get back in the car to go to school the next day is not a good long-term plan. So encouraging your child to find something that they enjoy, and those life skills in the sense that you are having to interact with others, you are learning disappointment and success, you are developing fine motor and gross motor skills in doing all of those things. I think we take for granted what used to be available and that we did just naturally before we were so technologically driven, and that when there was no phone and your phone was attached to a wall, that's what you did. You came home and you played with the neighborhood kids, or you joined the local rec team and you learned a new skill. I think those types of skills develop emotional, physical, mental wellness because you're engaging with others. And I think that would be the biggest takeaway, is that engaging with others is appropriate. Even if, and again, it could also be your siblings, in that you've played Candyland with your child and they don't always win, right? I mean, it's okay for little Susie or Johnny to not win the game, because if they win everything, then, and we all know in life that's not a reality. So those types of activities I think are appropriate.
So if someone had any questions, maybe they've noticed that their child is presenting some issues that you guys have been talking about, and they wanted to bring their child to a TLC, is that something that they can be directly referred to? I know Sports Plus has a thing called direct access. Is there something in line similar for you guys? Or do you have to be referred to by a physician?
At TLC, it is very easy. We can be referred to directly by child's physician.
Okay.
And get those services started, get the evaluation recommended, then we can determine if they need services and provide those ongoing services.
So I would need to go through my physician to come see you guys. I couldn't reach out directly, I guess.
Correct.
Yes. And I will say that if your child is in school, then you can utilize the school staff and the school administration there to, if your child is receiving some type of special ed service, meaning that they are getting intervention either for academic or some other reason, maybe there's something you just didn't know about, but your teacher has said, they're having trouble in such an area. If they're receiving special ed services, a lot of times we'll start there. That's where it starts. But then we end up reaching out to the physician
Gotcha.
along that step. But sometimes your teacher can be a resource for you as well.
Okay. Everyone has a website nowadays. It's 21st century, but I assume you guys have one. And if so, what would the website be?
So the website to go to see what services the Therapy and Learning Center offers is therapyandlearning.org.
Okay, perfect. I will link that in the description. So listeners, if you're looking for that, you can click on that in the description of this podcast to find out more info.
I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming in today. This has been very informative. I am not a parent. I might be at some point in the future, but this has given me a really good understanding of what I need to look out for when it comes to child growth and development. So thank you all so much for informing me and informing the public on things to look out for. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And this has been another episode of We Talk Health.